The water type is one of the most common types of all of Pokemon, and especially in Generation 1. Overall, the water type is known for its overall quality. However, today, we're not looking at who's the best of the best. We're asking who's the worst, both competitively and casually for playthroughs. And at number 10, we have Gyarados, which is a water flying type with actually amazing stats all around, with both of its attacking stats reaching over 100, along with its speed and HP also being fairly good, and an even better move pool learning Thunderbolt, Hydro Pump, Blizzard, and Fire Blast via TM to hit just about everything super effectively. So if Gyarados is so good, why is it on this list? Well, the short answer is in Generation 1, water types are well known for being a little broken. So Gyarados just barely doesn't reach their level. However, it's still a powerful threat and extremely easy to get in the first generation thanks to everyone's favorite con artist on Route 4. This means if you train up a Magikarp to level 20, you can have a Gyarados ready to go around Misty, at which point it will be far more powerful than almost anything else available in the game. Especially due to the move Dragon Rage, which is extremely strong in the early game due to always dealing 40 damage exactly, enough to kill just about anything in 2 hits. This is helped by the fact that you can get the TM for Ice Beam right before the Grass-type gym leader Erica in Celadon City, and Lieutenant Surge gives you the TM for Thunderbolt. However, this also leads into why Gyarados is even on this list. Gyarados has a rough 4 times weakness to Electric type, which is scarily common in Kanto, especially in the competitive scene where Zapdos is known as one of the scariest mons in the game. And while Gyarados can threaten out the bird with a Blizzard, the myriad of other electric types make it far too hostile for it to be a reliable Pokemon in Smogon's overused tiers, the main place people play Pokemon competitively, especially with how many other Pokemon can slide Thunderbolt into their moveset and demolish Gyarados. Even some ground types Gyarados is meant to be able to check, such as Nidoking. While Gyarados may be incredibly powerful casually, its main flaw comes down to how it can be punished extremely hard on the Switch. However, once it's safely on the field, it can absolutely demolish most teams as long as certain checks have been removed already. And at number 9, we have the Lord Helix himself, Omastar. This is a water rock type with a staggering 125 defense and 115 special stat. However, the rest of its stats leave a lot to be desired. 70 HP is a bit below average, and 60 attack and 55 speed are just plain bad. Omastar struggles with its crippling 4 times weakness to grass. However, Omastar isn't all terrible. As its defenses are so high, it's nearly impossible to kill in one hit, even by opposing grass-type Pokemon. Omastar is a strong Pokemon, but what drags it down is where you obtain it in-game, as you can only revive the Helix fossil near the end of the game right before the 7th gym. At that point, the Omanyte is already 10 to 20 levels lower than Blaine's entire team. This, along with the fact that in the first generation, all attacking types were split into 2 categories, physical moves and special moves, which really held Omastar back. Water was a special type, which was greatly benefited by Omastar's high special stat. However, Rock was a physical type. This meant that the slight boost Omastar gained from using moves of its same type went to waste thanks to its pitiful attacking stat, which basically led to the question of, is the extremely high defense worth the 4 times weakness? Especially compared to other water types that were far easier to obtain. Omastar does have a place in competitive, however, thanks to its hard countering of the popular Moltres and Dragonite due to resisting fire and flying as well as resisting Dragonite's Wrap. In Generation 1, Wrap was a move that locked the opposing Pokemon in place for 2 to 5 turns, meaning they couldn't attack until you missed Wrap. And even if they switched out, you would just wrap the Pokemon they switched into to lock the new target in place. Omastar, however, takes almost nothing to even 5 wraps in a row, and it takes barely 10% damage from all of Dragonite's other common moves. Unfortunately, as the meta progressed, people realized other water types could do the same job but better, such as Tentacruel, who lacked the 4 times weakness, and had far better speed to get the jump on those same threats. That also leads into another one of Omastar's flaws. It lacked a water resistance that most water types had, which means that there was a limit to how much of a beating Omastar could take. Omastar is a fine Pokemon, but really only excels at countering flying and fire-type Pokemon, which really restricted its place in the meta, along with never really having a place in playthroughs due to being obtained so late. And at number 8, we have Dewgong. This is a water and ice type who at first glance isn't that bad. It has a fairly respectable stat spread with 95 special and 90 HP, along with a fairly decent 70 speed and 80 defense. However, there's also nothing quite unique about Dewgong. Dewgong is one of the 3 water and ice types in Generation 1. However, unlike its competition, it lacks a defining trait. Lapras and Cloyster both boast high bulk and a varied move pool, while Dewgong really only has water and ice stab and not much else going for it. This is compacted with the fact that you can't even catch one until nearly the end of the game at the Seafoam Islands, and at that point you could have gotten the other two water ice types long before it. Dewgong does help for the Elite Four quite a bit, but so does nearly every other water type, especially the ones who lack a fighting type weakness such as the previously mentioned Gyarados. However, it's not all bad for Dewgong, as 95 special with 90 HP is quite respectable as it shrugs off a multitude of powerful attacks such as Thunderbolt from Zapdos and a Razor Leaf from Victory Bell, and fires back with an incredibly strong Blizzard. Really, what holds Dewgong back is its immense mediocrity, as it's just far weaker than the other two ice water types, and desperately needs better coverage, especially moves that Cloyster and Lapras don't also have, as there is only a single move in Growl, one of the worst moves in the game, that Dewgong has over the other two. This is even more dire as ice and water coverage is something that around 20 other Pokemon in the game have access to, and they don't require you to travel to the end of the game to acquire. Dewgong really lacks just an identity, and feels more like an afterthought tossed into the Seafoam Isles to help the Pokédex reach 151. And at number 7, we have Blastoise, which is a pure water type with decent stats, especially with its 100 base defense, along with every other stat being around 80. Blastoise is one of the original starter Pokemon, which may shock you seeing that it's this low on this list, as you're given one for free at the start of your game. However, Blastoise really suffers from being a pure water type in a generation flooded with better options. Blastoise's main competition is the Pokemon Vaporeon, who is incredibly similar but with 130 HP and 110 in both defense and special, so it's far bulkier and even hits substantially harder. Blastoise does have slightly better speed and better coverage as it gets Earthquake and Submission, which does mean it's not entirely walled by an electric type, or another water/ice type like Dewgong. However, that doesn't help much, as it's so slow that most electric and grass types can just outspeed it and kill it before they're ever in any danger. Blastoise really suffers from its speed and not having a defining trait to place itself over Vaporeon similar to Dewgong and Lapras previously. Blastoise does have one attribute over other water types, and that's due to being a starter who learns 2 of the necessary HMs needed to beat the game, so it's a fantastic option for Generation 1 speedruns, along with being good against multiple gyms and being able to take down the entire league easily due to its good coverage. Blastoise is also incredible in the Never Used tier in Smogon, which is 2 tiers below OU and 1 tier below UU, where Vaporeon resides, due to being one of the 3 best Pokemon in the tier with its partners Mr. Mime and Clefable. However, even there, its speed can let it down occasionally. Blastoise isn't a terrible Pokemon. It's not even a bad Pokemon, as it's incredible for a playthrough. It's just fairly outclassed by being a pure water type and too slow to make a splash in the competitive scene. And at number 6, we have Golduck, which is a pure water type with fairly low stats, as no stats reach even 90, which even for Generation 1 is quite rare for a fully evolved Pokemon. Golduck, at first glance, doesn't seem all that unique. However, Golduck is one of the few Pokemon of the first generation with the move Amnesia, which is one of the strongest boosting moves ever created. All Amnesia does is boost the user's special stat by 2, which doesn't sound too good at first, until you realize in the first generation, special attack and defense were 1 stat. So this basically made Golduck from being a relatively weak Pokemon to an incredible sweeper thanks to a single Amnesia, literally doubling its special stat. Golduck is also incredibly easy to obtain, as you can catch one as soon as the 4th gym thanks to obtaining the TM for Surf. While niche, Golduck also has access to the move Submission, which is a fighting type move which helps a lot with the more powerful normal types in the game such as Chansey, who take little to no damage from any special attack. Golduck's move pool is substantially better than most Gen 1 Pokemon, especially a certain Water-Ice type, as it has access to the Psychic type Confusion and the Ground type move Dig. Confusion, Surf, and Ice Beam alone allows Golduck to beat nearly the entire Elite Four and a champion on its own. However, all of this doesn't really fix the fact that for Golduck to begin actually impacting the game, it basically requires a turn to click Amnesia, along with the fact that Amnesia doesn't fix Golduck's rather middling speed and defense, so physical attackers can easily take advantage of it, and some faster special attackers can even hit it before Amnesia raises its special defense at all, such as the previously mentioned Zapdos. As Zapdos can nearly kill Golduck in 1 hit before it ever gets the chance to raise its special, meaning the entire previous turn was effectively wasted. Golduck isn't a terrible Pokemon, but it's far too weak without exactly Amnesia, leaving it without much of a niche competitively. Although for a playthrough it's perfectly fine, although outclassed by some other Pokemon who are much easier to obtain. And at number 5, we have the other generation fossil, Kabutops. This is a rock-water type similar to Omastar, and actually has a really solid stat spread with 115 attack and 105 defense, and a solid 80 speed. Kabutops also contains the incredible move Swords Dance to boost its attack by 2 stages, along with the move Slash, which in Generation 1 effectively hits a critical hit every single time, dealing around double damage and ignoring any defensive boost the Pokemon might have. However, those 2 moves do counteract each other as Slash ignores the user's boost as well, so it needs to be used carefully. Kabutops struggles from a similar issue as we brought up with Omastar, as its water and rock moves use its special and physical stat respectively. However, as Omastar had an incredible special stat, so it didn't mind only using water and ice moves, Kabutops has a miserable special stat of 70, and doesn't even learn a single rock-type move, so it's stuck without a usable stab attack. Kabutops is one of the few rock types of Gen 1 absolutely ruined by not getting a single rock move, and so the only use Kabutops has for its incredible attacking stats are the moves Body Slam and Submission, which as we've mentioned before aren't very unique moves for Pokemon to have. Kabutops is helped immensely by doing the same thing Omastar did, but for lower tiers, mainly checking the Fire-type flying types in Moltres and Charizard, as even without a rough 70 special stat, Kabutops takes basically no damage from any of their flying or fire moves. Kabutops is a good Pokemon, just heavily brought down by not having any of the traits it desperately needed, such as a good move pool or a water-type attack to fire off its immense attack stat. And at number 4, we have Kingler. This is a pure water type with an astronomically high attack stat of 130 and an incredible 115 defense stat, which means Kingler is tied for the second highest base attack in the game. Kingler also gets Swords Dance, meaning after a single Swords Dance at level 100, its attacking stat is over 700. And with 2, it literally hits the cap of 999 attack. While that may sound incredible, Kingler has one small issue. It barely has any attacks. Kingler, similar to Kabutops, lacks any physical stab, and even lacks submission. So it's basically required to use Body Slam and Hyper Beam as its only way to capitalize on its high stats. Kingler also suffers from its pitiful special stat of 50, as even water-weak Pokemon like Moltres take barely over half health from its signature move Crabhammer. Another flaw with Kingler is that its speed and bulk are fairly mediocre. It has great defense, but it's incredibly easy to exploit its low special stat due to its grass and electric hitting it super effectively from the special side. Kingler does have an incredible niche in Gen 1 in U, as besides Kabutops, barely anything in the entire tier can survive a single Swords Dance boosted Hyper Beam, and the few others which can survive the attack like Golem desperately do not want to eat a water move. Kingler is obtainable at the same time you can obtain other Pokemon like Golduck and Tentacruel, which means you already have other Pokemon that are arguably better due to their decent coverage, which helps a lot more for a playthrough than a Pokemon who can basically only attack with normal type moves. Kingler is similar to Kabutops in that its flaws aren't exactly its own fault, as it really just needs something to make use of its amazing stats, but until then it belongs at number 4 on this list. And at number 3, we have Poliwrath. This is a water fighting type Pokemon with a rather unassuming stat spread, especially its pitiful speed combined with its average bulk. However, what really makes Poliwrath stand out is its access to the incredible Hypnosis. Hypnosis in Generation 1 was effectively a guaranteed kill, as your opponent was effectively stuck doing nothing for 1 to 7 turns, and even waking up took an entire turn, so Poliwrath had all the time in the world to capitalize on the status. Unfortunately, that's about where Poliwrath's good qualities end. Poliwrath is one of the biggest victims to physical and special moves being type dependent, similar to Kingler and Kabutops from before, due to how miserable Poliwrath's special stat was, and how most of its unique moves like Psychic and its Water Stab Hydro Pump were locked into its special stat. Poliwrath even got access to the previously mentioned Amnesia, which just led it to be a worse Golduck due to its lower speed and myriad of weaknesses. Speaking of weaknesses, it also struggles due to being a fighting type, one of the worst types in Generation 1 due to Psychic being unimaginably broken, thanks to the type effectively lacking any weaknesses in Gen 1, along with the fact the best fighting type move Submission has fairly mediocre damage and poor accuracy. Poliwrath struggles in playthroughs as well due to being obtained once you unlock the Fishing Rod after the 3rd gym, where you next have the Grass and Psychic type gyms, which once again leads to the problem of Poliwrath's poor typing. Poliwrath has 4 weaknesses: Psychic, Grass, Electric, and Flying, and nearly every good Pokemon in the game has one move to take advantage of one of those weaknesses. Poliwrath does have a small niche thanks to having the powerful Hypnosis, but its lackluster stats and typing lead it to being a jack of no trades more often than not. And at number 2, we have Seadra. This is a pure water type with fairly decent stats, all things considered, as it has 95 defense and special with a solid 85 speed. Seadra really lacks much to make itself stand out from the crowd, as its only unique trait is being one of only 2 water types in the game with access to the speed boosting agility. However, requiring an entire turn of setup only to raise your speed just isn't good enough for the high tiers of competitive play, especially for a Pokemon who can only really attack with water and ice type moves, which is incredibly easy to wall and make the setup turn a wasted turn. Seadra is also difficult to use in playthroughs due to being obtained so late, as you don't even have access to one until before the 7th gym battle, which normally requires a water type to access anyway due to the HM Surf. Seadra is a decent late game sweeper in Inu due to having a decent matchup versus most teams thanks to being a check to the common Nidoking and Golem that, unlike Kabutops, doesn't take a large amount of damage from a stray Earthquake. However, Seadra struggles immensely against other bulky water types, especially Blastoise, who it basically has no game against as its best attack in Hydro Pump barely does 20% to Blastoise. Kingler can also use Seadra as an easy target to collect sword dances against before sweeping the entire team. Seadra isn't terrible, however, its entire strategy kind of hinges on you removing your opponent's bulky water at all cost, and softening the team for your own agility sweep. This is incredibly risky, especially because you're basically playing 5v6 until the last minute. Seadra is a fine Pokemon, however, it's obtained far too late in the game to be useful and is far too easily countered competitively by common Pokemon. And at number 1, it's only fitting to be the king itself, Seaking. This is another pure water type Pokemon with entirely middling stats, as its attack stat is its best stat, however, every other stat barely reaches 80. Seaking is the perfect culmination of every issue mentioned previously on this list. It's a water type with attack being its best stat, pitiful stats all around, and an incredibly shallow move pool. Seaking is another Pokemon you can obtain after the 3rd gym battle, meaning it's competing with Pokemon like Golduck and Kingler due to them all sharing the exact same typing. Seaking really only has one useful trait, and it's the exact same trait we just mentioned for Seadra, and it's due to Seaking being the only other water type with agility in the game, and is by far the worst of the two. Seadra at least gets the incredible base power 120 Hydro Pump, while Seaking is stuck with the base 95 Surf. Seaking is another mon who suffers from no physical water type attacks like Kingler, but at least Kingler has Swords Dance to become genuinely threatening with Body Slam, a move Seaking wishes it had. The only niche Seaking has is being a budget Seadra in the PU tier, the lowest tier in the game, which is called PU as a joke about the Pokemon smelling bad, and comprised of mostly not fully evolved Pokemon such as Graveler and Ghastly. Seaking is just a stock standard water type with its singular entirely unique trait being its access to the unusable flying type attack Peck, which makes it the singular water type in Generation 1 to learn a flying type move, as even the flying type Gyarados ironically doesn't get flying coverage. Seaking is just a run-of-the-mill water type who blends into the crowd so well you almost forget it's even in the game.